July 8, 1973, a 17-year-old German tourist, Heidi Mnilk, bright-eyed and full of life, boards a train at Charing Cross, red flares, red top, camera in hand after a perfect day of sightseeing. Just 90 seconds after leaving London Bridge, a blood-curdling scream rips through the carriages. Two teenage boys in the next compartment freeze. The door flies open, a red bundle tumbles out, Heidi's body hurled onto the tracks below. They watch in horror as a smirking man leans out, hair whipping in the wind, eyes locking on them like it's all a sick joke. He pulls up his trousers at the next stop and vanishes into the crowd. One brutal murder, one photo fit haunting London rail lines, one family left without answers. This is the unsolved murder of Heidi Mnilk. Welcome to Crimes That Haunt Us. We release a new case every Sunday at 6 p.m, so hit subscribe and don't miss the next one. And let me know your thoughts on this case in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. In the shadow of a war-torn Europe on November 12, 1955, Heidi Anne-Marie Mnilk entered the world in the historic city of Kassel, West Germany. As an only child, she grew up in a modest household marked by hardship. Her father Bruno rendered unable to work due to grievous wounds sustained during the brutal conflicts of World War II. The post-war German environment shaped her early years, a landscape of rebuilding and resilience, where Heidi developed an early fascination with science and healthcare. By her teenage years, she had embarked on a path as a pharmaceutical apprentice, eventually working as a local chemist back in her hometown of Kassel, dispensing remedies and knowledge in a community still healing from the scars of the past. At just 17 years old, Heidi was described as a bright, adventurous young woman, her long blonde hair framing striking blue eyes, standing about 5 feet 4 inches tall. She possessed a modest command of the English language and was noted for her shy demeanor, a quiet intensity that belied her curiosity about the world beyond Germany's borders. And so in early 1973, fueled by that sense of adventure, Heidi planned a 2-week sightseeing trip to the United Kingdom with her close friend Doris Theroux, also from Kassel, a journey that promised excitement and new horizons. The two young women arrived in England on July 3, 1973, stepping into a foreign land brimming with possibility. They settled into a cozy bed and breakfast owned by Jean and Edmund Webster in the suburban enclave of West Wickham, Kent. Sharing the back bedroom of the house, Heidi and Doris were remembered fondly by Jean as decent, nice young women, polite guests who brought a touch of youthful energy to the quiet home. The morning of July 8, 1973 dawned with promise. At 9 a.m, Heidi and Doris set off to join a coach carrying other German tourists for a day of sightseeing in London's vibrant West End. Heidi, dressed for the occasion in her red flared slacks, a red cotton top, black shoes, a red handbag, and a blue and white checked coat, an ensemble that captured her spirited style. By the afternoon, the group was released to explore freely, and Doris would later recall Heidi being utterly absorbed in capturing the city's wonders through her camera lens, snapping photos that immortalized their joy. Those photographs, developed by police in a desperate bid for clues, revealed nothing but innocent memories of a happy trip to London, no hints of the darkness that loomed. As the day wound down at 4:57 p.m, Heidi and Doris boarded the Hayes-bound train at Charing Cross Station. In a fateful decision, they separated. Heidi, averse to smoke, entered a non-smoking compartment alone, while Doris headed to a smoking one. The train's design added to the isolation. No internal corridors connected the compartments, with doors opening directly onto the perilous tracks below only. This train design would be abandoned in the decade to come following safety concerns. It remains a haunting mystery whether Heidi's killer was already lurking in her carriage, or if he boarded later at Waterloo Station or London Bridge, slipping into the shadows unnoticed. Meanwhile, two 17-year-old boys, Andrew Lee and Stephen Arnold, had clambered onto the train also at Charing Cross, settling into the neighbouring carriage to Heidi's. oblivious to the horror about to unfold. Heidi was viciously attacked, a mere 90 seconds into that segment of the journey. She suffered a devastating 5-inch stab wound to the neck, severing a major artery in a single lethal strike. The boys in the adjacent carriage were suddenly jolted by piercing screams that had echoed for about 20 seconds before abruptly falling silent. Dismissing it as mere horseplay among passengers, they carried on, until they witnessed the door of the next cabin swing open violently. A red bundle flapped wildly against the rushing wind for a harrowing moment before tumbling out, and then the door slammed shut with finality. The boys initially thought someone had lost their luggage, but peering out the window, they glimpsed what appeared to be a little girl, judging by the feet and legs, as the train sped away relentlessly. Shock gripped them. Moments later, they described seeing a man leaning out of the window from Heidi's carriage, gazing into theirs. He made direct eye contact with Stephen, who recoiled in instinctive fear. The man's hair blew backward in the wind, and he wore a smirk on his face, staring as if to mockingly convey, "It's all good fun, isn't it, chaps?" Minutes ticked by agonizingly until the train pulled into Charing Cross Station. There, the boys watched in disbelief as the man disembarked and stared intently into their carriage while pulling up his trousers, a chilling, deliberate act. He then turned on his heel and fled through the ticket barriers, vanishing into the evening. The boys described him vividly, a man with a squint and pockmarked face, his features etched into their memories forever. Shaken, both boys disembarked and urgently pointed out the fleeing man to station staff, insisting he had just thrown a woman off the train. But the staff member, a 19-year-old Jamaican native, dismissed their frantic claims as a prank, fearful of jeopardizing his job. He cleared the train to continue on its way, a decision that would haunt the investigation. Undeterred, the boys jumped back onto the train, disembarking at Catford Bridge before racing to Andrew's house. There, they meticulously wrote down the attacker's description and called the police, only to face dismay as authorities initially disbelieved their account also. Sometime around 5:30 p.m., however, the grim reality could no longer be ignored. Heidi's body had been spotted by the driver of an oncoming train, lying 365 meters from London Bridge near Abbey Road and Enid Street. British Railway Police swiftly established a crime scene, cordoning off the area as they grappled with the horrifying tableau before them. The severity became clear. Due to the catastrophic neck injury, this was unequivocally a murder investigation, prompting an immediate halt to all train services. Back at the Hayes terminus, Heidi's friend Doris waited patiently for her companion, traipsing up and down the train to look for her, but Heidi never appeared. She then lingered for the next train, hoping for a reunion, but when that too arrived without Heidi, Doris returned to the B&B and informed Jean that she assumed Heidi had disembarked at London Bridge, perhaps to take more photos, a heartbreakingly innocent explanation. Meanwhile, the machinery of justice roared to life. A murder room was established at Tower Bridge Police Station, mobilizing nearly 100 officers from the Metropolitan Police, British Transport Police, and Scotland Yard in a coordinated assault on the unknown. The fateful train carriage was diverted to Sightings in Orpington for meticulous forensic examination, every inch scrutinized for traces of the killer. Heidi's distinctive blue and white houndstooth-checked coat, bearing the label Betty Barclay Fashion sewn into it, was conspicuously absent from both the carriage and her body. Investigators quickly concluded that her killer had likely taken it as a trophy or to conceal evidence. The post-mortem examination, conducted by Dr. Keith Mant, painted a stark picture. A single stab wound to the neck that pierced an artery, leading to rapid unconsciousness and death from massive blood loss. There were no signs of sexual assault, a small mercy in the midst of the tragedy. Bruising and other abrasions coincided with her fall from the train. The investigation surged forward with relentless intensity. The next day, on July 9th, Scotland Yard released the identikit of the suspect, based on the boy's accounts, circulating it widely in the media. He was depicted as aged 37 to 45, 5 feet 7 inches tall, with a thin build, a long, thin, pointy face, squinty eyes, thin lips, and a pointy chin. His short brown wavy hair was swept back, his complexion slightly tanned or red-faced, clean-shaven but very spotty, pockmarked skin that stood out. Dressed scruffily in dark or grey or black baggy trousers and a jacket, police speculated he might be a hotel worker, urging the public to come forward. Then a breakthrough came on July 10th when police discovered the murder weapon. A 5-inch kitchen knife, 3/4 of an inch wide, sharp on only one side, located approximately 100 yards up from where Heidi's body had been found, discarded in the killer's haste. 2 days later, on July 12th, detectives brought the two boys back onto the same train, where they relived the harrowing events, recounting what they had heard and saw in vivid detail. They pointed out the exact direction in which the killer had fled after disembarking, providing crucial directional leads. In the immediate aftermath, a wave of terror rippled through the community as scores of women began contacting police, recounting their own frightening encounters with a pockmarked knife man on trains between Charing Cross and Hayes, echoes of a predator who had stalked the rails before. On July 15th, detectives orchestrated a full reconstruction of the murder and its timeline, hoping to jog memories and unearth new witnesses. A policewoman dressed up as Heidi, donning the red outfit. In the months that followed, police compiled 4 potential sightings of the killer, each matching the photo fit in eerie detail. On July 28th, a man in his 20s, described as having a spotty face and working as a railway employee, was brought from his home in Lewisham for questioning over the weekend. An identity parade was lined up, but he was ultimately released without charges, the first of many dead ends to come. Back at the incident room, detectives pieced together those 4 separate sightings of the man in the photo fit. Sightings 1 and 2 came from witnesses at Charing Cross Station who had reported a man resembling the photo fit running away from the station through a tunnel under the railway track shortly after the fateful train's arrival. Investigators surmised that only a local would know of the tunnel's existence, adding a layer of familiarity to the killer's profile. They also deduced that the killer must have intended to disembark with his ticket at Charing Cross Station, as none of the ticket collectors recalled any man brushing through the turnstiles without one. Sighting 3 originated from a local shopkeeper in the area who informed police that a man identical to the photo fit had frequented the store every 2 to 3 weeks over a 3 to 4 month period prior to the murder, purchasing half a pound of clear mints each time. But ominously, he stopped coming after the murder, vanishing like a ghost. The 4th sighting was perhaps the most chilling, an eerie encounter with the likely killer many months prior. In late September 1973, a 40-year-old Danish woman came forward to police with a terrifying account from back in February of 1973 on the same train line. A man had entered her alone carriage at Charing Cross. Suddenly, he brandished a wooden-handled kitchen knife and demanded, "Are you German?" To which she replied, "No, do I look German?" To which he snarled, "Yes, I hate Germans, especially German women." She managed to convince him she was not German, talking ceaselessly to de-escalate the threat. He eventually sat back and began cleaning his nails with the knife, a macabre display of calm. Police noted that her description of the knife matched the one used on Heidi precisely. She described him as like a student, carrying a khaki-style army knapsack filled with books, and he had claimed he was en route to an art gallery whilst also training to be a chef. On October 6, armed with this new information, police released an updated identikit based on the Danish woman's newer but strikingly similar description to the boys, refining the hunt for this elusive train killer. Heidi Mnilk's remains were ultimately repatriated to her hometown of Kassel, where she was buried among profound mourning by her family and friends. Her B&B hosts, Jean and Edmund, made the somber journey to attend the funeral and, in the years that followed, dutifully kept the Mnilk family up to date on any developments in their daughter's case, a testament to the bonds formed in tragedy. In February 1974, another layer of dread emerged when a lady travelling on a carriage between Ladywell and Waterloo encountered a terrifying man described as strikingly similar to the Heidi Mnilk suspect. This man exposed himself to her while tapping a knife on the window, a perverse taunt. During her 15-minute ordeal, she changed carriages 3 times, only for him to relentlessly follow and repeat the sequence. She disembarked at Waterloo, reporting the incident to authorities, but the man melted into the crowd. Shortly after, a passenger handed in a short-bladed sheath knife found on the same train, a chilling replica of the murder weapon used to kill Heidi. By April of 1974, detectives expanded their theory, seeking assistance from the Navy, Army, and Air Force institutes, hypothesizing that Heidi's killer was a former service member once stationed in Germany, fueling his virulent hatred for German women. The NAAFI's weekly magazine printed the identikit, but ultimately it yielded no leads. Another avenue closed. On July 8, 1974, the 1-year anniversary, the 14-strong murder squad boarded the same Charing Cross train, armed with the identikit. They interviewed every passenger on board, querying whether any had been on the train a year prior, and seeking fresh information on the suspect. August 12, police raided the home of a 30-year-old Covent Garden porter in Deptford, detaining him for questioning. His arrest stemmed from an alleged confession, but he briefly escaped while being escorted to the car, only to be recaptured and interrogated back at the station. Doubts about his confession led to his release without charge. He was then remanded to Brixton Prison on unrelated offences and would later rescind the confession entirely. In November 1974, the official inquest into Heidi Mnilk's death convened at a London coroner's court, presided over by Coroner Dr. Arthur Davies, who meticulously reviewed the available evidence. This included detailed witness testimonies from the 2 teenage boys who had heard screams lasting approximately 20 seconds before seeing her body ejected from the moving train near Bermondsey. The inquest examined the post-mortem by pathologist Dr. Keith Mant, confirming the cause of death as a single deep stab wound to the neck and upper chest that severed a major artery, leading to rapid exsanguination and unconsciousness, with additional minor abrasions on her hands likely from the fall onto the tracks. Jurors heard about the initial police response, the recovery of the blood-stained knife wedged in a railway sleeper about 100 meters from the body, and the missing blue and white houndstooth-checked coat that Heidi had been wearing, which was never found and became a key item in public appeals. A pivotal testimony came from the 40-year-old Danish woman who recounted her February 1973 encounter on a train from the New Cross to London Bridge. There, a man tripped over her feet, sat opposite her, pulled out a knife after she spoke, held it to her neck, and stated he hated Germans, especially German women. She de-escalated by claiming she disliked Germans too, after which he trimmed his fingernails with the knife, discussed topics like Spain, roses, an art gallery, a catering course, Toronto, which seemingly agitated him, and needing to lay low. He smelled of diesel oil and boiled onions, with filthy hands, fat-splattered shoes, dark swept-back hair, a pockmarked face, squinting eyes, and being about 40 years old, 5 foot 10 inches tall, the knife matching the one in Heidi's murder. After deliberation, the jury returned an open verdict of murder by a person or persons unknown. The coroner described the crime as particularly nasty, with no assault but implying a sexual aspect to the motive alongside the killer's paranoid hatred of German women, and regretted the railway staff's failure to act on the boys' initial reports, particularly the porter at New Cross who dismissed them as a prank, a delay that may have allowed her perpetrator to escape. The case remained officially open, prompting massive public appeals orchestrated by Scotland Yard, which involved widespread media coverage in newspapers like the Evening Standard, television broadcasts on programs such as Police 5, and the distribution of posters across London and beyond, all urging tips on the suspect. But regretfully, the case was going nowhere, and the case soon became cold. In January 1975, news broke of another attack on a Southern Region train. A 24-year-old woman was stabbed on a train travelling from Norwood to London Bridge. She survives after undergoing emergency surgery. Also that January, the murder incident room at Tower Bridge began to wind down as Heidi's case turned cold. Despite speaking to some 75,937 people during the intensive investigation, the killer remained painstakingly elusive, even as suspected linked train attacks on women continued unabated. On July 31st, 17-year-old bank clerk Wendy Hall was stabbed 4 times in the neck and chest by a man described as blonde-haired and 5 feet 10 inches tall in a lone carriage as it passed through a tunnel in Tulse Hill on the Holborn Viaduct to Mitcham train. He also robbed Wendy of £1. She immediately underwent emergency surgery and miraculously survived, but her attacker escaped. 3 weeks later, in mid-August, 24-year-old Rachel Williams of Wandsworth was attacked on a train between Rains Park and Clapham Junction. She too would survive her stab injuries. Then a potential major breakthrough emerged in that same year of 1975. Patrick Mackay, a violent serial killer, confessed while in Brixton prison to Heidi's murder among an array of other murders, sparking brief promise in the Heidi murder room. But it was short-lived. Mackay then recanted these confessions, claiming mental illness. Through clever police interview tactics, they revealed through omission that Mackay had no knowledge of Heidi's missing jacket, which the killer had taken, and noted other inconsistencies such as his height and facial features differing. Mackay was eventually convicted of 3 other manslaughters, 2 elderly women named Isabella Griffith and Adele Price, and a priest named Father Anthony Crean, whom he killed with an axe. Mackay was then linked to other unsolved murders via further confessions. July 20th, 1973, Mary Hines stabbed in Kentish Town. January 1974, a homeless man thrown off a bridge. January 12, 1974, Stephanie Britton and grandson Christopher Martin stabbed to death. June 13th, 1974, Frank Goodman beaten with a metal bar. December 23, 1974, Sarah Rodmell stabbed in Hackney. February 1975, Ivy Davies beaten with a tent peg in Southend. Many involved knives or stabbing, but no train-specific others. Police ultimately ruled him out for Heidi's case. The Southern Region train services would experience another horrific attack nearly a year later, on August 14, 1976, as a young girl was stabbed on a train between Sutton and Carshalton beaches. She survives her injuries, with no description of the attacker given. Just over 2 weeks later, a 60-year-old woman was attacked on a Southern Region train again. The offender tried to sexually assault her at knife point before knocking her to the ground, leaving her dazed and fleeing with her handbag. On September 6, the Evening News released a photo feed provided by British Transport Police linking 6 recent localised knife attacks on Southern Railway trains to the same offender. He is described as age 22, 6 feet tall, slim with close-cropped hair, blue eyes and a spotty complexion. He was last seen wearing a royal blue jacket-length raincoat, single-breasted with a centre vent. Police claimed he was a regular user of the trains between Sutton, Mitcham and West Croydon. On January 4, 1977, 24-year-old London commuter Kim Taylor was stabbed 8 times in the head, arms and chest at lunchtime on the 4:58 Norwood to London Bridge train, just after it passed through Bermondsey station. Kim had been sitting alone in a carriage with a man in his early 20s who wore a red jacket. He leapt from the train as soon as she started screaming and fought back. The train came to a halt after Kim pulled the emergency communication cord. She described him as a normal-looking sort of boy, aged 17 to 22, 5 feet 8 inches tall, slim build with brown hair. On June 27th, the Evening News reported that a 20-year-old British railway worker from Wimbledon was arrested at the station upon arrival for his shift over the rape of a woman the prior Thursday on an overnight train. The paper also noted that he was expected to be charged later that day. It was understood that this man was to be questioned in relation to 9 other Southern Region Railway attacks, including the murder of Heidi Mnilk and the stabbing of Wendy Hall. Heidi Mnilk's long-dormant case was briefly reopened by detectives from Scotland Yard in 1988, spurred by eerie parallels to the brutal stabbing murder of 26-year-old Deborah "Debbie" Linsley on March 23, 1988, on a commuter train in London, reigniting public and media interest in unsolved railway crimes from the era. Linsley, from Bromley in Kent, had relocated to Edinburgh as a hotel manager but was visiting her parents for a management course and to prepare as a bridesmaid for her brother Gordon's wedding. She had boarded the 2:16 p.m. train from Orpington to Victoria at Petts Wood, entering an apparently empty first-class compartment, where, during the 10-minute journey between Petts Wood and Brixton, she was savagely attacked with at least 11 deep stab wounds to her face, heart, neck, abdomen and hands, showing defensive injuries from a desperate fight. Her body was found at Victoria around 2:50 p.m., still holding her return ticket with undisturbed belongings, indicating no robbery motive. Foreign bloodstains suggested the killer was injured, leading to interviews with over 1,500 witnesses and appeals for a man with facial scratches, describing him as a white male in his 30s with light brown hair. Investigators compared it to Heidi's case due to the isolated train compartments on South London routes and the knife use, reviewing evidence like suspect descriptions and the anti-German motive, but no definitive link was found, as Linsley's attack was prolonged and frenzied with possible sexual undertones, unlike Heidi's single stab wound and body disposal. Despite later advancements like a full male DNA profile extracted in 2002, mass screenings of over 6,000 men, and a £20,000 reward, Linsley's case remains unsolved, with no breakthroughs tying it to Heidi's or any others. Heidi Mnilk's case endures as one of the Metropolitan Police's most haunting unsolved homicides, having gone hopelessly cold despite periodic reviews, extensive early investigations, and the inexorable passage of time that has eroded any remaining physical evidence or living witness recollections. No DNA breakthroughs, no credible new confessions, and no decisive forensic matches have emerged to identify her killer, leaving the photo-fit image of the squinting, pockmarked man who smelled of diesel and onions as perhaps the most enduring clue. The disturbing cluster of other knife attacks and threats against women on trains in South London also went fully unresolved, fueling contemporary fears of a serial offender targeting women in isolated compartments. While some descriptions and patterns overlapped enough to raise suspicions of a single perpetrator, police at the time and in subsequent reviews could never establish definitive forensic or behavioral connections between these crimes and Heidi's murder, nor rule out the possibility of multiple unrelated attackers exploiting the vulnerabilities of the era's commuter rail system. Yet the memory of Heidi and Marie Mnilk endures as a quiet, heartbreaking reminder of a life stolen far too soon. Heidi was more than a name on a cold case file. She was a daughter, a friend, a hopeful soul who loved capturing moments through her camera lens and who trusted the world enough to explore it. Her murder remains one of London's most haunting unsolved crimes, but her story should not be defined only by the shadow of her killer. Instead, let us remember her light, the shy smile, the long blonde hair catching the London sun, the courage it took to travel abroad as a teenager in search of beauty and adventure. Rest in peace, Heidi Mnilk. Your life mattered, your loss still matters, and though time has not yet delivered answers, your name will not be forgotten. Thank you for watching and listening to Heidi's story. Please feel free to add your own thoughts, comments, and theories down below, and we'll see you next time.